something. All right, so I'm at Oakland Cemetery. Let's see if there's anybody else in the waiting room. Let's see, we got 25 people. Okay, I missed somebody. There she is. Hi, Lauren. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So, I am going to turn the camera around here. And this is Oakland Cemetery. It began in the middle of the 18th century, so the 1850. It was actually designed by a landscape architect named Horace Cleveland. So in 1850, this was designed by somebody. So that's another thing that's important in art history, is that you'll come across architects, right? Landscape architects that build buildings. You see this even in the ancient world, right? Something is designed by somebody. So one of the most famous Roman architects is Vitruvius. And so a lot of the history around designing and architecture they're influenced by each other, and you'll see that. Okay, I got somebody in the waiting room, hold on. Good morning, Chloe. Good morning, London. If you're just coming, we're in St. Paul's. This is Oakland Cemetery. Some of you might think cemeteries are weird, but should we show them that obelisk right off the bat?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to show you guys something, and then I'm going to ask you a question. All right. So you see what's coming up here? So this is in downtown St. Paul. It's just north of downtown St. Paul, off of Jackson Street. Can you guys see this? I wanted you to see the scale of it, and I'll go up by it here so you can see it. It's like I'm a roving reporter. All right, check this out. So this thing is big, right? So my question is, why is there an obelisk? Hold on. In downtown St. Paul that was made in the 1860s. That was put here in the 1860s for somebody Sanborn. Why, so another way of phrasing the question is, why is there So that's the question. Why? Why are these obelisks here? Where do obelisks normally live? Where were they invented? Well, you're right. You're half right. They are Egyptian, but they're not tombstones. They tend to commemorate pharaohs. So, for example, if you're a pharaoh, you would have obelisks made for you to flap around your kingdom to show your power. They weren't tombs in Egypt. That's an interesting point. They weren't tombs. They weren't tombs in Egypt. They had actual tombs and pyramids for their tombs. The obelisks were for markers to show off the emperor's power, or the pharaoh's power. Yeah? Let's hear it. Maybe. You mean like is Mr. Sanborn Egyptian? Well, probably not, because this is Egyptian, and Egypt, right? This is a 3,000, 5,000 year old idea, right? So where you would find obelisks is in Egypt, and they're 3,000 to 5,000, 6,000 years old. So this is a really old structure. And so the question is, why in 1850 are there obelisks in St. Paul, Minnesota? Yeah, yeah. But the question is, why in 1856 did so many people in St. Paul have obelisks? You're right, that's an attractive feature. You're right, that's an attractive feature. It's grand, it's beautiful, it's ancient, right? It connects to a lot of things in history. But why in St. Paul in 1856 did they start popping up? All over the place. And it's okay, it's not just obelisks. So I'm kind of, rambling on about obelisks. Let's show you this. Why is there Greek and Roman temples and columns here? You see that one? Yeah, right? Like there's something in the water, right? They're like all freaking out. They gotta have their Greek, Roman, and Egyptian architecture or they're just not gonna be happy. Right? There's something going on. Look at this. Like, this is something that you would see from the ancient world. Now, we made a connection to the church, right? We made a connection to the church at school, right? At the chapel and in Riley. Are you seeing a connection to the church here? Maybe a little bit, but not as dramatic, right? This is more kind of connection to the ancient world. Now, this is a non-denominational cemetery. It was started as a non-denominational cemetery. So it is a Christian cemetery. However, look at Arthur King. I don't think it's King Arthur. Maybe it's King Arthur's. Awesome. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? And over there, we have more of these Roman and Greek temples. They're everywhere. This cemetery is amazing. Okay, let's get back to the reason they're here. Okay, this is a cheeky answer, but how many of you know who your founding fathers are? Show of hands. Right, you know the story of the founding of America, right? 1776, the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers, there's a lot of them. We have, right? They all got together to figure out how to govern and to create a government and a civilization in America. Guess what they studied? Guess what texts they were reading? Guess what cultures they went back to help them design America, a democratic country, right? Under the ideals of a republic and to create a new way of governing themselves. They looked back to Rome. They looked back to Egypt. They looked at Egypt. They looked at Egypt. They looked at Greece. Why? Greece lasted for thousands of years. Egypt lasted 3,000 years. Rome lasted 1,500 years. These were civilizations that lasted a long time. A long time. And we still, when you go to those places, these structures are still standing. You go to Egypt, there's obelisks. You go to Rome, there's temples. They're still there. So the founding fathers built America on the ideals of the ancient world: Greece, Rome, and Egypt, and Mesopotamia. I don't see any Mesopotamian things here right now. So these was a powerful idea to connect your new culture, your new civilization to the ancient world. And so they started to build buildings based on the ancient structures, right? To say, hey, we believe in those old cultures. They lasted a long time. We're doing a similar thing.
Question, Rick.
Yep.
Is that Fauché building also an obelisk?
Yes, it is. It is. It's referencing an obelisk. That's a good connection.
And so then this architecture is somewhat patriotic in a way?
Yes, exactly. This is American architecture because they're taking the old symbols from the ancient world and refashioning them into a new place. Exactly, and it was fashionable. You guys all kind of talked about that. This was fashionable in the 1850s. And this isn't just an Oakland Cemetery. You go to any small cemetery in Minnesota, you're going to find an obelisk. You might find a mausoleum that looks like a Greek temple. Trust me, any small town in America, especially when you go to the East Coast, right? When we go to Washington, D.C., we see these things everywhere. Now, the Egyptians, if they came here and saw the obelisk, they'd be like, what the frick? You got a lot of pharaohs, right? They wouldn't understand how we were using it, because it was the obelisk was only reserved for a pharaoh, and yet here it's being used to commemorate who's a citizen of St. Paul, right? So it wasn't for a pharaoh, it's for a citizen, which is important too, because in America we say that every citizen has the rights of the pharaoh, right? Because we are the pharaoh, we are governed by our people, theoretically, right? So check this out, this is pretty cool, there's another one. So this is a mausoleum, there's a family who's buried in there, right, or interned here, and they're doing it, right, in a Greek temple. This is a lot like, right, this is a lot like the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., correct? It's similar, it's different, but it's a similar idea, right? It's commemorating these people using the ancient world. Now we have a term for this, and the term is neoclassical. It's an actual move. What I'm showing you is an actual movement in art history. And a movement is like a fashion, right? The fashionable thing to do is to make tombs, buildings, banks, right? The Fauché Tower out of the inspiration from the ancient world, and we call that neoclassical. So these are neoclassical structures because they reference the old world. So it's the new classical. And this is what's cool about art history is that when you start to see these themes and you ask these questions, you discover this whole amazing world, right? Like just coming to Oakland Cemetery and being like, why are all these ancient structures here? It opens up to you kind of the founding of our country, the founding of Minnesota, and how these people were really into the ancient world. Now, of course, if you go to the Capitol building, same thing, correct? But there it's even referencing other movements in St. Paul. A lot of our Capitol buildings in a lot of the states look like a Roman temple, right? They have columns, they're right made out of marble, they're referencing the ancient world. So any other questions? What do you guys think? And then there's like kind of a 19th century church. Yeah. What about them? Oh, well, it's a reference to a culture. So Egypt lasted for 3,000 years, and the pharaohs every pharaoh made obelisks. So the last pharaoh was Cleopatra. The last Egyptian pharaoh was Cleopatra. I mean, she was famous for that reason, but famous for other reasons too, right? Because she had a relationship to Rome, the Roman Empire. But she had obelisks made to her. There's like 9, I think, of them in the world. There's one in New York City, there's one in Paris, there's one in London. She had many obelisks made to commemorate her leadership. She had them scattered across her kingdom. And then in like the 19th century, because we love the ancient world, like America, France, the UK, England, we took all that stuff because we loved it and brought it back to our country. So we had a fascination with the ancient world, and so we started to make obelisks for ourselves because Egypt lasted as a government and a civilization that lasted. So America was founded as differently. In the Renaissance, it manifests itself in the Renaissance, which was a rebirth of the arts and culture. And we call that like a humanist, an interest in humanism, because up to that point, the Western world in Europe was Christian centric. Everything was centered around the church, right? Everything was centered around the church. Your whole life was centered around the church. If you guys know this, if you go to Europe, every single town is founded around a church, right? The church is the central feature of those places. So here, we believe in this, right? In America, we believe in this. It's different. It's not the church. We believe in the church, but the church is separate from the state, right? It's the separation of the church and state. And this is another manifestation of that too. You can see the symbol of that. That's a good question. Anything else? Isn't that cool? You kind of have to come here if you want and drive through. It's open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you have a car, I'd encourage you to get a bunch of people together, wear your mask, open your windows. And you could just literally, it's a 40-acre site. There's 40 acres of this. I don't want to bore you by walking through all of it. It's called Oakland Cemetery. Let's go to one more obelisk. Now, we're gonna walk past another mausoleum here, and I'm gonna show it to you, and this is a little different. This is inspired by the ancient world, but it becomes a little more modern. So I want to point this out to you. You ready? This has a reference to the ancient world. Do you guys see this? But there's something different about this. How would you guys describe this? This is a little different. It's got a reference to the ancient world, but it's completely different. Anybody describe it? Anybody feel like describing that difference? Maybe this looks modern, right? What makes it modern versus that being old-fashioned?
That door, it's like super.
Yeah, the door is ornate. What else? And maybe you guys could even reference it to some art that you've seen, or movies you've seen. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you mean it's like a flat pack house? Yeah. It's very clean. Exactly. This is kind of getting to like how we build things today, right? Simple and clean.
People are kind of saying, like, it's having that, like, an architecture feeling, but the pillars are like inside of it. It's like saying,
Yeah. These are not holding up the structure, right? These are decorative now. This is decorative. We have a term for this building. It's called Art Nouveau. So this Art Nouveau, even Art Nouveau references the classical world, but it's changing it to become more decorative. You see that? It's more decorative. It's flat. This is like a modern painting. This is like a painting by, like, you name any modernist painter. It's flat, right? It's the flattening out of space. There's no depth, right? There's no depth anymore. It's just the symbols. Now, this is an important thing. This is actually a reference to the ancient world. If you know your Egyptian mythology, you should know what this is. So this is another point in art history that's really important. It's not quite literal, but it's a reference to the Egyptian world. So anybody know who Isis and Horus are? So Isis and Horus are showing you some more sculptures of her and Horus later. It could be. Yep. Yep. That looks like it's like a lamp. That's an oil lamp. Right? She's holding a lamp, which is the light. Right? It could be an eternal lamp, right? Which could be referencing something else. We could probably look at, right? It could be a symbol of many things from the ancient world, right? Like, do you guys know about? So there were some really important figures in Rome. They're called that were women, and they took hold on, can you remember the name of them? They're the
Vestal Virgins.
Yeah, the Vestal Virgins. So the Vestal Virgins were very important women in the ancient world, and guess what they did? The Vestal Virgins. They kept the fire burning. The fire could never go out. Their job in the ancient Rome was to keep the fire burning so that people who needed fire could come get it. Isn't that crazy? So that could be a representation of the Vestal Virgins, right? The eternal fire. Because the Vestal Virgins' job was to keep the fire going for all time so that people had access to the fire. They also provided clean water. Guess what else they did? They also provided help during birth. This sounds like nurses, doesn't it? They were like the nurses of the culture. They were very sacred in ancient Rome. In fact, they couldn't be married. They couldn't have sexual relationships with anybody. If they did, they'd be murdered. They'd be killed. And they were Vestal Virgins for like until they were 40. And then once they were 40, they could be married. They could no longer be. But they didn't have to be Vestal Virgins anymore. They were honored in the Roman culture.
Rick.
Yep.
The other interesting thing about this is that there is no detail around it like there is in the other one.
Yes.
It's like a Western town on a movie set.
Greg just pointed out a good point. There's no detail on the sides of this one, whereas
Or the
in
back.
that one there is, or the back. There's no details. Let's go look at it. It does, doesn't it? So this is because it's modern. Look when this was made. 1966. Right? It's very modern. And then there's stuff like this. This is like a tomb that you would find in Rome. They call them sepulchres. That term shows up in the Bible, right? So sepulchres were tombs, grave markers for the wealthy Roman senators. If you go to Rome, remember I told you last week, or I told you on Wednesday, that in Rome, only the emperor could be buried in Rome. Everybody else had to be buried outside of Rome. So this is a direct reference to the sepulchres in the outskirts of Rome. You can go visit them. They're on what's called the Via Appia Antica. It's a road that goes from Rome to the Adriatic. It's still there, the ancient road from Rome. Take a bike, don't walk, it's a long ways. Trust me, I did that once. All right, so then, look, then we have a more stripped down version, right?
Same family.
Yeah. More modern version. Okay, let's check this one out here. Then you see people taking liberties with the obelisks. All right, now how many of you want an obelisk for your tombstone now? Yeah, I think I know an obelisk. All right. Check this one out. This one, they put a sculpture on top. Right, so this is, you would never find an obelisk with a sculpture on top. Somebody just asked a question, I know about that, so that's on. Yeah. Yes. 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 So,
It's a 3 obelisk triangle.
Like awesome. And just call them somebody else. Screw it, I want to call them. The reason why I'm doing this is that I want you to recognize that the world that you live in is full of this. It's full of this. All you have to do is snoop around or pay attention when you're walking around or when you're watching TV. You might see, or you're watching movies, or you're listening to music. Bob Dylan has a famous song where he mentions ISIS.
It's called ISIS.
It's called ISIS. So even in music, you're going to see art historical references or cultural references, right? In art. It's really, these themes are really amazing. And I think it's easy to think that because you're a modern person, it's easy to think that these things don't relate to you, but they do. They do relate to you. They're part of your history, whether you know it or not. Here's a smaller one. You can see it in relation to the tree. So I thought it would be really important for me to come down here and show you guys this, right, in person, because it makes it more real. Okay? I wish you guys could all be here. But this is a good substitute. So that makes sense. This is a connection to the ancient world because in America, we designed our government, our constitution, our ways of governing ourselves based on that ancient world. Make sense? Oh, this world is freaking out.
Look at the tiny fat obelisk.
Oh yeah. Which is this one?
Yeah. Oh no, it looks like one from the edge. It's not.
A little stubby one, guys.
It's just a stone, but it looks like one from the side.
So look at that. It's getting changed a little bit. Questions? I want to make sure that you guys understand that the themes in art history are actually amazing themes that people buy into, right? Cultures buy into themes. You buy into iPhone. I'm walking around with an iPhone. Greg's got an iPhone, right? Like, we love iPhones. Like, we can't not have them. But they didn't exist before, right? And so everybody has them. Everybody's into them. And that's how I would kind of equate this neoclassical world. Everybody bought into the neoclassical idea. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere, especially from the Midwest to the East Coast. The Midwest and the East Coast in cemeteries, you'll see the reference to the neoclassical world. You see it in your town halls, and you see it in banks, and you see it in train stations too. So I'm going to take you guys on a little field trip via Zoom to some of the other neoclassical locations in the near future. So you Oh, for sure. For sure. You see the names of things too, right? Like things get named like separate or right investments, right? Like that's part of yeah, you're right. These names, these ideas and concepts probably are embedded even in our code, right? Okay, so then the other obvious reason I'm here is that on Wednesday, we were at the Apostles' Table. The Apostles' Table is made out of rocks, right? And these are all rocks, correct? Different kinds of rocks. Granite, marble, right? Different materials. Some of these are cement. But the interesting thing about rocks is that rocks are a powerful theme throughout art history and throughout history. And I always argue, if those of you who are artistically inclined and you want to make something that lasts, you might start working in rocks. Don't make paintings, don't make drawings. Those nobody doesn't care about those. They're gonna burn them and throw them away. They're too much of a burden to take care of. Whereas this, you can just plop an obelisk down. People probably won't move it. Don't make anything out of bronze because that can be melted down to make something else. So another reason to work in rocks is they last a long time. Right? So another theme, so what I'm getting at is that another theme that you could spot would be things made out of rocks, right? So it's not just the cultures or the ancient world or the ideas is the materials are also a theme throughout art history. The materials themselves have a theme, right, that you see as a thread through history. So you have the Neolithic people making things out of rocks, right, the stone table, and then we have us making things out of rocks to commemorate our loved ones. Any other cool ones?
Look at this pair right here. The obelisk and the column.
Oh yeah, here we go. So I'm going to be asking you guys next week, this is just a foreshadowing of something I'm going to be asking you to do next week and into the future, is can you spot the themes? Can you spot themes? I mean, and the themes are human themes, so they're almost endless. Look at this one, it's got a sphere at the top. And it's column.
He might have been a bowler.
Isn't that cool? This one's got some engraving on it that this happens. This guy. So if you brought an Egyptian pharaoh to these obelisks, I think they'd probably be disgusted with them. They would see him cheap. Right? Because they were only reserved for the pharaoh in the ancient world.
Do you know what they were made out of in the ancient world?
They were made out of marble from the desert in Egypt. There's a really famous, there's a range of marbles in Egypt. The most famous is called the porphyry marble. It's this red marble. It's actually purple. And it became the color, you know how purple became a really important color for royalty in the ancient world? That it's from that purple because it's some of the most expensive marble in the world. It's called porphyry marble. We actually have a version of porphyry marble here in Minnesota, down in Laverne, Minnesota, at the Blue Mounds. And it's red rocks, purple rocks, but it has a different story. It's connected to the Native American.
Yeah, Laverne, man.
Yeah,
Are you kidding?
Laverne. Right? It's the Native Americans believed that the rock is red down in Laverne, Minnesota, because they would chase all the buffalo off of it, right? And then the buffalo would die, and it would just be like a sea of blood. So they thought the blood got absorbed into the ground and was absorbed into the rock. That's enough, but that's another theme. What do you guys think? Any questions?
How about Stonehenge?
We mentioned Stonehenge last year. I saw somebody talking, I can't hear them.
I can't either.
Grace, is that you? Oh, the buffalo died because they fell off the rock cliff or the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
They fell off. They chased them off the mountain and then they'd fall off. They'd fall like 100 feet, 150 feet. Yeah, that is a sad Buffalo Day. So one of the reasons why this is important is that you see the mashup, you see the kind of the changing of things and how different people take ideas from other cultures, from other cultures, from other ideas, and they modify them for their own uses. And I would argue you and I do the same thing, right? We build off of this, right? We're on the shoulders of giants. Look at this one. This is another new Art Nouveau one. Look at this. Look at that decorative bronze door. Isn't that beautiful? But yeah, it's a little more, what would you say, shapely? It's got a reference to the frieze up at the top, right, from the ancient world, up there. Yep.
This one reeks of Germanicness.
Yes. Now, bronze doors go back to the ancient world as well, though. And it goes back to the Renaissance. How many of you guys know the most famous doors that are made out of bronze, or actually made out of bronze and gold leaf, in Florence, Italy, from the Renaissance? There's a really set of famous doors Doors are really famous in art history as well. It's called the Gates of Paradise. If you guys are at your computers, look up the Gates of Paradise in Florence, Italy. Doors aren't as important to us these days. I think, you know, we like big, expansive openings. Well, so what I'm going to ask you guys to do starting this weekend, and I'll post this on Moodle, it's not a heavy lift. I'm going to ask you to be looking for themes that you think maybe be connected to other things. So while you're walking around campus, while you're watching TV, if you like to read, right? Like if you like to read novels, or if you like to play video games, these ideas are awesome. Yep. 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 That's a good question. I don't think they did it because it was easier. I think they did it because it was way more fashionable. It was very fashionable from the 20s to the 60s to work in a simplified, Art Nouveau, modern fashion. So they were trying to do a modern people. Modern people make things pretty simple. Right? Like modern ideas are about there's no art in them. There's no form. Right? I'm not going to take up the whole time walking around Oakland Cemetery. You could, but you guys get the idea. The world is a fascinating place, and if you just open your eyes, you'll see the connection to the ancient world, or the Renaissance, or the 19th century, or you'll see how those cultures were influenced by the cultures before them. And so I want you to start opening up your eyes and your ears and seeing if you can spot themes. And the trick to this is to find themes that you're interested in. So it could be like, hey, you know, I'm really interested in love and hate. I'm going to go back in art history and mine it for love and hate. Well, you're going to find it, right? You could be interested in politics, and you're going to find politics if you go back, right, in art history. And so that's the cool thing about art history and history in general, is that if you can find a theme, a human theme, and you go back and you start looking for it, you're going to find it. If you're interested in the human form, right? The human body, go back to Greece, go back to Rome, right? You're going to see a culture that's hyperly interested in human form. You got a theme that you're interested in, Greg?
Not offhand. Time, maybe. Time.
Time. Oh, time is a theme, right? Time's a theme. You see that in Greek and Roman myths. Time is part of the equation. We have movies about time, right? Like time travel. It could be memory. So, you know,
Yep.
it's the gamut of human things, right? Human emotions, human ideas, human interests. So themes don't have to be as literal as I'm doing for you today, right? Like ancient world. But the theme could be about an emotion or an idea, and you go back and you start looking for it, or you pay attention for it in your everyday life. There's a video game, I don't remember the name of it. Last year, a student did their final research presentation on a video game that basically references the ancient world in a very neoclassical way. So you'll see it even in modern games and modern things, this reference to other times, other places. Somebody just said something, Grace. What did they say?
Yeah, they're like, so the only thing I can think about when you mention time is melting clock.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the ancient world, they had a thing called the Fates, and the Fates were a representation of time. So there was 3 Fates, and they were women, which I like that they were women. The three fates were women. I forget their names, but one of them spun your life into being, right? Time began. Then there was one in the middle who held up the thread of life, and then there was the one at the end who cut it. So the fates managed time. They brought things into being, they took care of it, and then they cut it. So, right, like, so Dali represented time in this kind of surrealist new way of representing time, right? Okay, so that's directly connected to the theory of relativity, right? Dali was a man of his time. The theory of relativity came about in his time, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, time can be warped, space-time continuum can be warped? Well, that means I need to paint differently. Right? So that's a good point, because Dali is being affected by the science, right, and the math of his time. They're like, what? Einstein's saying that space is warped? Time and space are warped because of gravity and the speed of light? E equals, right? Like they're like, wait a minute. So that changed art. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought up that painting. That's what I'm getting at, is the themes are interconnected with other disciplines, interconnected with other cultures, interconnected with an infinite array of things that will fascinate you. And the trick is just to go find it. Or just open your eyes. Pay attention in a different way. Any other questions before we sign off?
So, in what kind of ways would you see, like, time outsiders to be?
Well, you'll see it in a sculpture, because there's sculptures of the fates, and the fates were written about in Greek plays, and writings, and poetry.
Calendars too, like,
Yeah, calendars. Yeah.
Book of Days.
Yeah. Oh, another way of, yeah, exactly. The night sky as a measurement of time, right? The cycles of the moon, right? Some people refer to like 25 moons ago. Angelica was in was in Madison, and such happened, right? So yeah, we reference time a lot with the heavens, with the sky. Lots of different ways. Yeah, does that make sense? The calendar is a great one.
Book of
Like
Days.
time is a human invention, because humans are born and they die. So we're like obsessed with time, right? Because we have very little time here on Earth. So we're like, uh-oh, time is limited. So we're obsessed with time. You're going to see that everywhere. The clock's ticking, right? For whom the bell tolls, right? That's time. Oh no. Have you guys? There's another great. There's a great book called "When the Owl Calls My Name." That's it. Has to do with when the owl calls your name. That means you're going to die. So that has to do with time, right? You're waiting for the owl to call your name. So if you start thinking about it, these themes are interconnected and they're everywhere. Good questions. Do you have any other questions? These are great questions. Okay, we got to show you one last thing. This is a weirdo. I don't know what this is. It's like a turkey roll. It's like a Someone's gonna afford this whole thing.
Just give me the roll.
Right?
They said, just give me the
Like a
roll.
log. Maybe they were like lumberjacks or something. Look at it, it's not very big. Well, so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is to be looking for these themes, and you're going to be doing this the rest of the semester and hopefully the rest of your life, because this is what makes art history infinitely fun, is that you find a connection, you find something you're interested in based on the themes, right? And they're human themes. You'll find them everywhere. Love, hate, I know I keep coming back to that. Anger, peace, war, you name it.
Redemption.
Redemption, yeah, redemption, right? Redemption,
Revenge.
revenge, betrayal. Goes on and on and on. Death. Death is a really, you know, I know I'm in a cemetery. This isn't lost on me. Death is a big theme. Birth is a theme. Life, right? The struggle in life is a theme. Friendship is a theme. You name it. So what I'm getting at is that you have a way of connecting to art. You just have to find the thing you're interested in and start looking for it. and then start asking if those themes are connected to other themes and to other ideas throughout time, throughout art. And it becomes infinitely more interesting and joyful. It's not a chore. No, remember I said on Wednesday, this isn't about memorizing things and spitting them back. This is about making a connection to it. That you have a personal connection to it because you are thinking about it and you're interested in it. For me, Oakland Cemetery is infinitely fun, and I like to share it with people because it's this neoclassical cemetery in 1856 that's just sitting here in St. Paul. All right, guys, have a good weekend. I'm gonna post your next assignment. Remember to finish up your forum posts on your personal connection or professional connection. That's due today. And then next week we're gonna start our next work. But it's gonna begin this weekend, having you do a little bit of a reading, and then also a little bit of investigating these themes, this idea of themes. I'm gonna ask you to be spotting over the weekend, spotting themes. So I want you to come to class on Monday prepared to say, hey, I saw a thing, or I read a thing, or I watched a show, or I remember a book, or I remember a conversation, or even in your other classes, because these themes exist in the Bible too, right? Or they exist in other things. So you can even do this in class. Basically, you don't have to work to do this. You just have to pay attention, right? You don't have to do any stuff. Have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. If you guys, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime. Yep. See you guys. The question is, did that record? Doesn't matter because you recorded it. It's really weird on my phone.